Now that we have our can animating in our view, let's go ahead and create a script that's going to trigger those animations. So on PC here, I'm going to right click in the folder and then go to scripts. And then inside of this folder, I'm going to right click and create another C# script. I'm going to call it pop can movement. Now, notice as we look in our inspector, my pop can movement is named the same thing in the class. A lot of times I'll get an email from students or what have you where they'll create a C# script and they'll click off, and they'll click back on and they'll rename it whatever, player health. And then they get this error which says no model behavior script in the file with this name. And the reason is because the script's class name is new behavior script, but they named it player health. So you have to rename it, either reopen this and make sure that the names are the same, or type it right at on creation. So I'm going to double click this video or this script and then pause this video so that we can open up Visual Studio. Alright, so let's go ahead and I'm going to dock this here, and I'm going to dock this off to the side just so we can see this. On my PopCan, which is here, I'm going to go ahead and make a prefab. What that does is that stores all of the scripts and all the other stuff attached to it. So if I go back to my PC folder here, go inside of PopCan, and I drag this guy into here, you'll notice that if I go over here and I rename this just PopCan, hit enter and hit apply, it'll update in, didn't look like it updated. I'm going to go ahead and select this guy and delete it. And I'm going to rename, let's go ahead. I guess it did connect to it. Let me undo that a little bit. PopCan animation, there we go, PopCan. I'll rename it in here. I'll name it PopCan Prefab. I think my computer was just running a bit delayed. So let's drag that in there. Okay, so now anything I do in here and I hit apply, it'll update in here. So the first thing I want to do on this PopCan prefab, and you can think of prefabs as a collection of scripts and items that you're attaching. When I go in there, I'm going to grab that script and drop it on here. Now let's create a variable. So we're going to make one that this variable controls speed, and this is going to eventually control the speed of our character. So let's do float. Let's do public float speed. We'll make that equal to 1. Save it. Now what you'll notice is as I click in here and it compiles, a new variable is going to pop up, and it's called speed, and has a 1 assigned to it. That's what this public keyword does. The next thing I want to do is I want to access something called a rigid body, which is how I'm going to be moving my character around. So public rigid body equals, I'm going to name it PopCan, PCRB, so PopCan, we can spell it out just to kind of, for clarity. So PC rigid body, I'm going to save that. Oh, sorry, it doesn't equal it. There we go. Now, because I'm attaching this to my script, you'll see in here that a public rigid body called PC rigid body is here. What I need to do is, looks like it didn't compile correctly. Let's save that. Come on. There we go. So it wasn't rigid. It was still thinking that was there. Notice that it's asking me for the rigid body component. Now I can go in here and add a rigid body, and then, or make a separate object and attach it. But the reason why they allow you to make this rigid body is because sometimes when you're in a game, you can affect the rigid body that's attached on another object. So if you're shooting a character and you want the rigid body to send it flying or whatever, I want to get this rigid body component that I just added and plugged it in there. So the way to do that is I do PC rigid body. I'm going to copy that, paste it in here, equals I'm going to get component, and the component I'm going to plug in this greater than less than sign is the rigid body. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S and save that. Now when I press play, you'll notice that it finds that component and it plugs it in there. And it actually starts using it. Notice that my can fell when I pressed play. It started falling, and that's the gravity component in my rigid body. So what I need to do in order to stop this guy from falling is I need to add a component, and that's a box collider. And what you're going to notice here is that it's really huge, and the reason for that is I just realized something. When I created this PopCan file, I didn't send it as meters when I exported it from Maya. So I'll cover that in a future video. So it says my file scale is 0.01. So what that is when I go back in here, that means my size is actually 0.01 of my object. See that? And also it's setting it low because the pivot point of my character is actually at the bottom of my object. So when I'm selecting my pop can here, it's setting that to the pivot point. Now I have to go 1/2 of this to get it up here to get to my center point. So that's 0.005, and you'll notice that it surrounds it. Now let's go ahead and throw a plane underneath it and bring it a little lower. Now our can should not fall through the plane. Boom, looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Save my scene, so I'm hitting Control S here, and then for now I'm just going to save it in the assets folder as test. Alright, so this is our test scene. Really quickly, I want to go in here and I want to, because we're already hitting the 5-minute mark, I'm going to make an if statement. And what we're going to do here is we just want to check, we want to do that switch. We want to do a function that will turn on my, that will go from my idle state to my walk. So we're just going to do that. So I'm going to say if input dot get axis, and then inside of this we're going to go horizontal. Now it has an error here, and I'm going to explain that in a second, and it's going to tell us what it is. It says you cannot implicitly convert float to boolean. An if statement checks if something is true or false. Are we pressing a key? Well, if we're getting an axis here, we're actually looking for a number. So if I move to the right, you'll notice that my numbers go higher. If I move this to the left, they go lower. So we're actually getting the axis of one of these axes, which is a numerical value. So I'm just going to check if that is not, that's what the exclamation point, equal to 0. And I'm going to save that. A couple other things. So you might be confused, like, what is this horizontal and what is this input? Unity, if you go to Edit Project Settings and go to Input, you'll notice that it has all these axes already in here, right? And one of them is horizontal, and that's mapped to A and D. So this is kind of a really nice thing inside of Unity that lets you do shorthand notation. So what I want to do is, I'm going to do this really quickly, is inside of this guy here, I'm just going to double click this PopCan controller. Now, I'm going to allow this video to go to 10 minutes because this is really important. Notice that last time, and I'll select this and delete it, we dragged in an idle state and a walk state. Now I want to transition between these two, so I'm going to right click make transition again, just as a reminder, right? And now when I press play, you'll see it transitions and it walks. But I don't want it to always do that. I want it to only do that when I push an A or D key. So I'm going to select this arrow here. You'll notice off to the side it says condition is empty. If I hit plus, there's no conditions for me to select. So that's where these parameters come in over here. So if I hit the plus sign, and I just add a boolean, for example, and I just type in walk. Now, if I select this again, and I change this to walk, it says if walk is true, that means checked on, will idle. All right, so let's select this guy here, and I'm going to select this so you can see that in here. Now when I press play, you'll notice it just idles because this is not true. So when I check this on, it'll start walking. So how do we trigger that? Well, that's where this coding script that we just put in here. So what we're going to do is, remember we got the component here, which is a rigid body? We need to get one more controller, or one more component. So I'm going to make a public animator component, and I'm going to call this anim semicolon. And doing the same thing we did here, I'm going to type in anim equals, and I'm just going to copy and paste this because of time. I want you to type it out if you're not comfortable typing it out. And then inside of here, we need to get the animator component. Let's kind of make this a little neater. And we also make it to make it equal to get components. So now we are actually getting, let me press play here so you can see this. Come on, there we go. Now we have a new variable that's animator. When I press play, we're actually getting this animation component here, which is this guy right here. And what we're going to do is, if we push A or D, we're going to type in anim. We're going to set boolean. That's what this variable is here. Open close parentheses, semicolon, and this takes two parameters. First, what is it that we want to access? Well, I want to access my walk. and then comma, we're going to set that to true. I'm going to hit Control S. Now let's see this thing in action here. Press play. I've got A and D. My finger's on A and D. I click in my game view here. You see my can is idling. Pressed A, it's now walking. If I press D, it's now walking. We've never set it to go back, right? So a couple other things we need to do, just for your own knowledge, is let's go back in here. Let's go back on this guy. What I want it to do is, in any point in my idle state, I want it to immediately interrupt it and start walking when I press A and D. That's when you uncheck has exit time. So what that means is when I press A and D, it'll automatically play it. Let's really quickly, I know we're at 10 minutes, going to right click, make transition back, select this guy, and what I'm going to do is say we're going to not walk when we are, when we have one more condition in here, and that's vertical. So that means when we are, well, we can do, let's see, we can check it so that if we are, if input.axis is equal to 0, let's do that. Then it idles. So let's do this. So if input.axis is the same as 0, let's try that out. Let's see if this works. I've actually never done it this way. We're going to set this to false. Save that, and then let's, no, I guess we don't need to make another condition. Let's try it. So I'm going to press play here. And if this, let's see if this works. So I'm doing this, I release my key, and yeah, we're idling. So that's perfect. All right, and then I know it was 12 minutes, but a lot of jam-packed information. In the next video, we'll take a look at moving our character around.